Game of Thrones is one of the most iconic fantasy franchises of our time. It took a fantasy setting with dragons, wars, and magic, and somehow made it a politically tense and emotionally rich character drama. When the show released in 2010, it became a massive hit and seemed unstoppable. However, unlike other amazing shows like Breaking Bad, it sadly couldn't keep its momentum going and slowly started to go downhill. I mean, seasons 1 through 4 are honestly peak TV, with season 3 standing out as my favorite season of all time of any show, period. However, by the time the writers ran out of books to adapt, as George R.R. Martin decided that Winds of Winter is just a fever dream, the HBO show started to show heavy cracks. Seasons 5 and 6 started doing many outlandish things and steering slowly into the realm of make-believe, which is hard to imagine the show didn't always do this when you look at season 2 consisting of Melisandre birthing a shadow baby, but here we are. I mean, as the seasons progressed, characters started gaining plot armor, teleporting to areas where the plot needed them most, and just started spouting lines of dialogue so confusing that I was shocked this was the same show as the Chaos is the Ladder speech. Seasons 7 and 8 are some of the most disappointing pieces of media I have ever seen and really made me lose faith in the show. However, as I've been looking back, I don't think it was all bad. I'm not talking about season 7 and 8. I mean, the show has had many iconic plot lines in its original 4 seasons, from the Red Wedding, to the Purple Wedding, to Tyrion's trial, to Ned Stark's death, to Dany's gaining of the Unsullied, to the Tyrell and Lannister feud. I mean, I could go on for ages. Seasons 5 and 6 definitely dropped off this train, but I will say there were some plot lines that I thought were actually pretty good. I mean, people still talk about Hardhome, the Battle of the Bastards, and Hold the Door, but that's the thing. Most of these were highly spectacle fights or moments. Nothing really stood out as a politically rich character study like in the first few seasons. I mean, even the King's Landing storyline with all the sparrows felt like it dragged on. With that being said, one arc did manage to achieve this and has been overlooked this entire time. That plotline is the Siege of Riverrun, taking place in the second half of season 6, but mainly in episodes 7 and 8. So, as a quick recap, it essentially follows my absolute GOAT before he is butchered, Sir Jaime Lannister, as he is thrust from his post in the Kingsguard in King's Landing and sent to recover the castle of Riverrun for the Lannister allies of the Freys, which has been taken over by the Blackfish. Although initially seeming like a random plotline that came out of nowhere, it slowly starts to fit into the narrative as a whole due to its reintroduction of the Freys and its resurfacing of the Blackfish being a potential ally for Jon and Sansa against the Boltons in the north. Now, what makes this plotline so memorable, I mean, there's no spectacle or action, just conversations between various characters, but that's exactly it. Game of Thrones was at its best when the dialogue was rich and you felt the stakes and tensions between characters. Instead of rushing to be a castle fight, which is what I would have expected, it was a slow and methodical deconstruction of Jaime's character, which showed how he has evolved since season 1. Which brings me to my overall thesis. The Siege of Riverrun was memorable to me and thus underappreciated because of its slow focus on its characters and the relationships with Jaime, the highlighted themes penetrating with the parties at play, and the incredible pacing and rising of stakes, leading to a very clever resolution. First, in order to understand why I think this is a fantastic plotline, one must understand my favorite character from any piece of media. Jaime Lannister started off as one of the main villains in the beginning of Game of Thrones, in how he pushed Bran out of a tower window and consistently terrorized the Stark family and especially Ned in King's Landing. He was seen as a spoiled narcissist who was also incredibly impulsive and loved playing the game of war, being one of the best swordsmen who ever lived. It wasn't until season 3 where we started to see his facade come apart through his trip with Brienne of Tarth. His relationship with Brienne was another thing this plotline got right, but we'll get into that in a bit. Essentially, at this point of the story, Jaime is starting to experience a bit of an identity crisis. His love for Cersei and his family means he has to uphold what it means to be a Lannister, what it means to be Tywin's son and uphold his reputation. However, he is also struggling with upholding his honor and knighthood, which is challenged further when Brienne arrives at the siege. In this plotline, Jaime wants to reclaim his reputation, which has slowly been sinking, but do so in a manner where he feels satisfied with himself. At the end of the day, his goal is to get back to Cersei due to his obsessive love for her, so he will do any means necessary to do it, but he would rather not destroy all his morals while he's at it. Jaime cares about the lives of others, something that Cersei and Tywin don't really feel. He doesn't want to kill the lives of the Tully men, but he has a mission he must accomplish. Through his interactions with various characters in this plotline, you see his judgment get tested. Pretty much all this plotline is just a compilation of convos with Jaime, whether it be with Brienne, the Blackfish, Edmure, Bronn, and even the Freys. Everyone has their own agendas and values on how this can go, as they constantly test Jaime, and he has to find his own solution. He doesn't want to be like his father and be brutal just to have a reputation. He wants to show his honor and his respect, but he has to get the job done, and he cares immensely about getting back to Cersei. This all comes out in one of the best conversations in the show, which is his scene with Edmure. There, he shows he believes in respect and honor, but also shows he can be scary and ruthless in his own way, weaponizing his own love for Cersei in a scary way like Tywin would. I genuinely think it's the only scene in the show where I felt fear from Jaime. The Siege of Riverrun became Jaime's quiet rebellion in a way, and shows the shift in his character. He wears the lion's armor, he uses the lion's tools, but he acts with his own heart. He wants to reclaim his reputation, but through restraint rather than brute force. Which brings us to how this plotline also ties into the various themes and values of the various houses here. When it comes to the Lannister family, they maintain appearances of nobility, but hide corruption, brutality, and emotional repression, which Jaime kinda loathes. He hates that people judge him for betraying his honor when he really just wanted to save lives. With the Siege of Riverrun, Jaime wants to uphold his family name and reputation by showing power and fear. But at this point, Jaime is also having a shift in values and cares about completing his goal without bloodshed. Meanwhile, the Freys want to gain the castle back at any means necessary, and just want to be ruthless, kinda like Tywin, but they come across as more stupid and pathetic. They're slimy, and Jaime has no respect for them. They cling to a castle which they didn't earn, they have no honor, Jaime doesn't want to be associated with them. Meanwhile, the Blackfish is the opposite. Jaime has respect for him, where he shows his values of family and old school honor. To a degree, he is someone Jaime aspires to be seen as. However, in this new world, these values, just like these houses of Stark and Tully, are starting to disappear. This plotline represents the death of the old order in a subtle way. The Blackfish is stubborn and shows his biggest weakness and represents the flaws of those houses. They have pride and rely on their old name rather than evolving with the world. The Blackfish doesn't respect Jaime and is thus defeated by him in a way he wouldn't have expected. The Blackfish knew he would lose the castle eventually, but he wanted to go down swinging. That would have been a win for him. He expected an aggressive and impulsive attack, like when Jaime was first captured in the Battle of the Whispering Woods way back in Season 1. But Jaime has learned. He has grown past those old values and beliefs. Which brings us to our last point, the pacing and raising of stakes. Not only does this plotline show a great adherence to the character of Jaime and the values of the houses, but it moves the plot forward and introduces elements in a suspenseful and methodical manner. The biggest thing I feel like I should mention is that this plotline brings in legacy characters we haven't seen since like Season 3. It's halfway through Season 6 now, and all of a sudden, we bring back Walder Frey, the Blackfish, and Edmure Tully, all loose plot threads from honestly the most iconic plotline of Game of Thrones, the Red Wedding. However, it's not done as a fan servicey thing. You need to understand what happened to each of these major characters. I mean, the Blackfish literally just went to pee and then disappeared for 3 seasons. But we also want to move the plot forward in the show, set up the endgame, and also tie in other characters and their changes. This is done perfectly when it comes to bringing in Jaime and his new sense of self. The Tullys need to be eradicated to fulfill the idea of the death of the Old Order, as we discussed before, but we also need to reintroduce the Freys to reset up Arya's revenge arc and her killing Walder Frey at the end of the season. Now, the fact that this doesn't go anywhere in the seasons after is not the fault of this plotline and is a topic for a whole other time. Basically, Arya should have gotten consequences for it and should have had major stakes. Ugh. Getting back on track, the pacing here is good as we start with the overall reasoning as to this plotline existing in episode 6. We see Jaime punished for defending his family and falling into the traps of his old self of being impulsive. He wants to now kill all the sparrows, but his relationship with Cersei and his sense of duty do keep him in check. We reintroduce the Freys and the conflict that they lost Riverrun with a brilliant return to form by the goated David Bradley.
If I want excuses, I'll put her in charge. They're laughing at us.
You also see that Edmure is back alive and will be important too. He is a spiteful prisoner now, but he still cares about his child and his own family, something that Jaime will later exploit when he is his hostage. Then we start with the siege in episode 7. We first start with the sorry attempt by the Freys, as mentioned by Bronn, and Jaime and him are both confused and disappointed that they're even here. Bronn brings a sense of comedy as he always does, bringing in levity with his relationship with Jaime, and even the hilarious scene with Pod later on.
Lesson number 1. Assume everyone wants to hit you, because they do, Pod. Everyone wants to hit a fucking squire.
Once Jaime takes over, we start to see the stakes start to rise as he starts building a proper siege and meets with the Blackfish. There we see Jaime's values get challenged for the first time, with the Blackfish showing his little respect, and Jaime, now annoyed, looks like he is going to be regressing yet again. However, episode 8 really shakes things up with the arrival of Brienne and Pod. The relationship with Jaime and Brienne is one of my favorites of any media. I mean, their season 3 plotline is my favorite plotline of all time. The two actors have amazing chemistry together, sharing great banter as well as emotional moments. I mean, have you seen their interviews? It's honestly kind of like Cersei and Tyrion too. Like, they're besties, even when they're supposed to hate each other. Anyway, Brienne brings back that sense of honor in Jaime. She is always the one challenging him to be the better person, and this plotline begins to show the effect she has had on him. As stupidly as Bronn points out to Pod, they would totally fuck if they could. The fact that Brienne convinces him to let the Blackfish and Tullys go to assist Sansa in the north says a lot. It does accomplish his goal of getting back the castle, but it also goes against what Cersei wants. Brienne straight up tells him Sansa is alive, and he's all like, yeah, I'll still help you. His agreeing with Brienne shows he wants to do the right thing, and his morals have now been challenged a second time. Essentially, the stakes being risen have nothing to do with if Jaime will live or die, but rather how he will defuse the situation. This all leads to the culmination and climax as Brienne fails to convince the Blackfish, so Jaime tries something ballsy: diplomacy and trickery. He uses the Tully's sense of honor and duty against them, as he lets Edmure go, as they will listen to him as their liege lord over the Blackfish. The Freys are not happy with this decision, as it's not what they would have done, and could have definitely backfired. Jaime, instead of listening to what everyone wants or even thinks about him, decides to show his maturity and follows his own morals, which are now a combination of the Lannister family plus his own beliefs. This also shows that Tywin kind of fails in instilling the right beliefs into his own children, but also underestimates their ability to change. Tywin's presence is still felt after his death in Season 4. Anyways, the Lannisters and Freys storm the castle, and as Jaime promises, he doesn't kill anyone, an accomplishment that is shown to be respected by Brienne when she actually writes in the Kingsguard book in the Season 8 finale. The only person to die is the Blackfish himself, and I actually kind of like how his death is off-screen, kind of just symbolizing how honor dies quietly and is forgotten about in this new world of scheming under the Lannisters. Unlike other battles in the series, this one is quiet and is more about psychological warfare rather than spectacle, which is probably why it sticks out so much to me. It's reminiscent of the old Game of Thrones, where the show wasn't about fighting but about characters, relationships, and clever tactics. It's not a CGI mess anymore, which is crazy because by Season 6, that's kind of what the show was turning into. It makes sense that this story slipped through the cracks, but I'm here trying to shed some light on it. I mean, the plotline also ends with a powerful scene too, as Jaime, his siege accomplished, walks along the battlements to see Brienne rowing away in the night. Instead of raising the alarm or saying anything, he lets her go and waves a solemn goodbye. The amazing instrumental song of Kingslayer, which played during his bathtub scene, shout out Ramin Djawadi, is played here again, and it is so poignant. I mean, listen to this. This should have been the last time these two characters saw each other, and it would have been a very powerful ending. But, I mean, that's something I will address in another video. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me gush about this plotline. If you liked my content, please like, comment, and subscribe. I plan on releasing more videos, including a small series on recreating the end of Game of Thrones with the last 2 seasons, Season 7 and 8, with the first video being focused on my goat Jaime once again. Thank you for watching.